Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the Soss. This is their part number 216US5 is what it is. This is a Soss 216 hinge. The US5 stands for the antique brass finish. A very nice antique brass. To my eyes, this is a pretty good antique brass, meaning whether it be a hinge or a push plate or a knob on a lock, there'll be variation to antique brass. This is a good medium antique brass. I've seen it a little darker. This doesn't have any features like a knob would, so that there'll be areas of it being lighter and areas of it being darker, or like a push plate that has no surface irregularities at all. That would be generally lighter. But to my eyes, this is a really good antique brass, and also gives you a small, to me, a touch of green, a feel of a green sort of color to my eyes. And that's how I really know, wow, that's antique brass. This is a pretty good finish on there. Has a lacquer on it as well. The 216 is one of their series of concealed hinges. The advantage of Soss are several and many, in no particular order. They are extremely elegant because they're concealed. You don't see the door hardware when you're using Soss in terms of hanging the door. They are extremely capable of excessive weight loads. There is no butt hinge, well, there are, but there are no pound for pound. Soss hinges are going to handle heavier loads because of the design and engineering that's gone into these several and many laminated plates that are here. They are reasonably inexpensive when you consider that you might apply them to an application where the design requirement is for concealed hardware or for a heavier door. We did a 3070 18 gauge door, and they laminated onto it 3/4 inch granite. I don't recall the hinge that I used, a 218 or a 220. I don't recall how many. It might have been 4 or 5. And the door swung in, and the laminate was on the push side of the door, so that wasn't trouble, and there was a small margin around. But the Soss hinge handled that very, very well. I don't know how heavy the granite was per square foot. I think marble half-inch marble per square foot might be about 7 pounds, something in that range. It's an educated guess. So the bottom line is, you know, would we be comfortable hanging that on typical 4.5-inch butt hinges? Generally not. And also what makes it elegant is it's available in all the, another advantage to it is you can do these in all of the finishes. You can do Soss and fire-rated versions. You can do them in self-closing versions as well, of which the 216 is available as an IC or an invisible closer. Okay. Now the reason that people shy away from Soss, and I feel like I am a very strong advocate for, don't get scared. It's not difficult. People look at that hinge and they say, well, how in the world am I going to prep for that? I have no idea. It's really easy. It's ridiculously easy once you stare at the template. If you've used a router, I was just having a conversation with a gentleman about an overhead concealed friction holder, a slide track system, and I offered my services of helping interpret the template. The client says, oh no, I've got my trim carpenter. He said he'll have no problem with that. And that means this person has a substantial level of comfort with a router, how to set it up, how to mortise, how to prep doors and hardware and other casework for hardware. And the Soss hinge requires that, but there's really only 2 steps it takes to prep for this, just 2, and there's only one cardinal rule that you can't violate, and that's called the E dimension when it comes to Soss, and we'll talk about that more in a moment. So this hinge is rated up for up to a 20-minute application. You can see that insignia right there. If you have a 20-minute door, you are permitted to use this hinge. It is also labeled. It's labeled on the front, but it also has the UL and ULC listed information there. That 97S9, that's a reference to the file at UL. If you were to, if someone were to call, being a fire door inspector, if I saw a hinge on a door and I was wondering if that hinge was permissible to use on a fire door, I could call the testing laboratory, UL in this case, give them that record locator, and they'd be able to tell me all about theoretically about the test that this hinge was subjected to allow it to have that sort of credential on it there and also here. Okay, hinges, some hinges don't need to have visual evidence. All others do. The Soss concealed hinge, spring hinges, they need to be not only listed, meaning that they have a record on file at the laboratory, but they need to be labeled. There needs to be actual proof on the hardware itself. If you look at a lock set, at the latch bolt, if it's fire rated, it will have evidence on there that it is. The 216 is a typical size. The 218 is probably more common for commercial applications, but the 216 is a common size, and we're going to go over that in the when we switch to the screen view. This is going to include 4 machine screws and 4 wood screws and a complementary finish. You can install this down onto either wood doors and wood frames, or wood doors and metal frames, or metal doors and metal frames. And it's not unheard of to do Soss on steel doors. I did a project maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago now where it was, again, an incredibly heavy door that it was a ridiculously heavy door. What they did was it was a 14 gauge hollow metal door, 4.0 wide and 8.0 tall or thereabouts. 14 gauge. They were then laminating on both sides of the door 12 gauge stainless steel. Every detail had to be deciphered and understood and relayed to the factory on my part to explain the back set of the hinge, where I wanted the hinge prepped. And the reason we went to Soss is because, well, it could handle the weight, is the bottom line. They didn't want a concealed hinge. This was in a project in Manhattan, and it was a facade look, no concealed hinge. It was on an upscale boutique. It was a service door next to the primary entrance, but those service doors have to look pretty good as well. Soss concealed hinges, exit-only panic hardware, and yeah, Soss. I don't recall how many I did and what hinge I did. That serves the point that you can do it on a metal door as well. Your factory can prep for Soss without really any trouble. Okay, so why would you use this hinge? Well, because it's elegant, it's concealed, it's capable. How you would go about prepping for that and the other details of the hinge, I'd like to switch this video now to the screen view, and let's take a closer look at the extended description. Then we'll move into the how you prep for these and that one cardinal rule that you can't violate, the E dimension. And if you follow that, you're going to love these. And I'll end this by saying, in all the decades, 3 in fact at this point that I've sold Soss hinges, I've had one client call me and say the hinge was defective. I says, what do you mean defective? He says, well, it just bent. And I said to the client, what were they doing on the door? Chin-ups? He says, no, it was a bookcase and the children sat on top of the bookcase. So the hinge wasn't defective. They literally put, and it was maybe a 208 hinge or a 204, a much smaller version for a bookcase. They literally, the hinge, he brought me the hinge and it was literally bent. All the laminated plates were bent. So all we did was replace that one hinge and he was back in business. So in my experience, Soss has a perfect track record of function. And when you compare that against today's 3-way adjustable concealed hinges, which I don't believe in only because I'm suspect of the long-term health of a hinge that's held together with screws, the Soss hinge, and they've sworn that they're never going to make a multi-axis adjustable hinge. You don't need one. People want those because I believe it's a reflection of the lack of firm grasp over how to go about the carpentry aspect of Soss. And I've reviewed Sugatsuni, Tectus, McKinney has one, and there's one other company that I think I've looked at. And they all seem fine. And I've talked to carpenters, and I've said, 10 years later, how did that hinge work? Is everything still in alignment? Yeah, as far as I know. So they're probably okay. But if you put that prep where exactly you need it, you're never going to have trouble with having to adjust the door and frame. And that's not an exaggeration. That Soss hinge is not going to move on you. It's just, there's nothing to move. It can't move laterally. The inset can't change. The height can't change. Well, unless people sit on top of the bookcase that this is used to hang. And all you have to do is mark it off. Mark, you know, prep the door accordingly, prep the frame accordingly. They even make a comprehensive Soss hinge template router system. I've sold that tool. I've reviewed that tool. It works. I've never used it because I've always done Soss with the individual templates because I don't do enough Soss. And then when we were, more sophisticated equipment replaces the router, the multi-axis CNC router, or you just have the wood door manufacturer prep for the material because no one can do it that cheaply. Let's switch to the screen view now and let's crack this open a little bit further. Here is the item that we are looking at, the 216 US5. Extended description information. The 216 is an invisible hinge for use in wood and metal applications for 1 3/8 to 1 3/4 thick doors. The 216 is made of zinc and steel material. The body itself is probably, the zinc would be my guess, and then all the laminated plates, of course, would be steel, and the pins that run through them. Superior appearance and durability, found in many applications where a flush fit, compact size, and smooth operation are necessary. They can open up to 180 degrees and are a single acting hinge. That's true, they will go to 180. And we're going to discuss that here in a moment. Extended information goes on to tell us similar items, similar information. So, the way to move forward is to tackle through these documents that are listed here. I had mentioned a dimension E, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. What you can see here are the basic dimensional properties of what the hinge is. The overall height of 4 5/8, the width of the body, 1 inch, the overall depth, 1 15/30. Okay, so you've got an idea of how large the hinge is. Let's look at the, let's go to the template first. So this is a drawing that gives you those same dimensions. This shows you what the preparation needs to look like in your door by providing you all of the necessary dimensions. So when you put these dimensions into the context of what you need to do in order to prep the door and frame for this, it's simply this. You're going to make 2 preparations. You're going to prep the body, which is basically this shape, okay, based on its width, which is going to be 1 inch. And then you're going to do a plate prep, which would be the 4 5/8 overall height, the 1 inch width, and then the thickness of that at 15/30. So there's really only 2 preps that you need to do. You're going to do the body prep, which will be this, then you're going to do the plate prep, which is this. The overall depth of the body, they want it to be at a 1.5 inch deep mortise. And again, 2 in 19/30. It's not your mortise size. What I generally do is put a caliper on it. I'd likely make that, 3/32 larger. So 2 and 11/16 in that range. 1 inch wide, and then our 1.5 inch deep mortise. That's your first prep. Your second prep is then going to be 4 5/8, 1 inch wide, 15/30 deep. At that point, you've prepped for the body and you've prepped for the plate. The only thing that you have to do is 2 things. Mark it at the proper center line, and when you are transferring locations from the frame to the door or the door to the frame, be mindful. If the top of the door to the top of the first hinge is, if the top of the door to the center line of the first hinge is, say, 7.5 inch, the underside of the header to the center line of the first hinge will be 7 5/8. It's 1/8 of an inch more, assuming you're going to have 1/8 of an inch gap on your installation. So you'll have your frame. Your door is going to sit inside of here. And that 1/8 of an inch is right in this area. So the frame dimension's got to be an 1/8 of an inch more than the door dimension. Simple. That's one. Number two is the cardinal rule. That's the dimension E that is mentioned here and is specified as here. The back set, the face of the door, assuming that you have a flush installation where the face of the door is flush to the face of the frame, it cannot exceed a 1/4 inch. So as long as that hinge back set is a 1/4 inch or less, you'll have no problem. If you make it larger, you're probably not going to get the proper swing that you require out of the door. That's all you need to know about this. What I mean to say is it's that simple. There's nothing beyond that. Dimension E has to be observed. Make your 2 preparations. Make your vertical center lines accurate. And you are off. And doing Soss will be the next easiest thing ever. Now, to talk about that dimension E, let's take a look at the clearance detail document that's here. And if you were to call Soss and ask them to help you understand how the clearance, what kind of clearance you can have, they're going to send you this sheet. And that dimension E is literally expressed here. Okay? So they're showing you different scenarios of where you might apply something. You can have dimension E effectively 0 on the door and frame itself, provided with the understanding that what you're applying to the face of the door doesn't exceed a 1/4 inch thick. And in that scenario, you'll have no problem going to 180 degrees because here, when it gets to 90, there won't be conflict. And now you can see if you move that hinge this way and you move that hinge this way, you're going to then cause a problem here, because where the arc angle is happening with this floating vertical center line, there's going to be a conflict here. Okay? Now you can see how they do other things to allow you to possibly have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. You need to have a certain backset on the door and frame prep, and you want to apply something. Well, cut it back to 45 degree, and it will still ultimately go to 180 degree. And what they tell us there is they're not telling us how thick that can be directly. So let's assume that is a 1/4 inch. Down here it says a 45 degree bevel on applied material with a thickness less than half the max door clearance will provide a 180 degree door opening. See hinge template drawing for door clearance at 180 degree opening. So if we go back over to the template, you're going to see door clearance, 15/64. So as long as your applied material is less than half of that, you will be able to squeeze that out into this sort of orientation. But really over here is where it discusses what happens if you were to exceed the E dimension, and it's because how the door and frame approach each other, and that dimension becomes extremely small in terms of clearance. So now you can tell that there would be conflict if you exceeded that E dimension. Wouldn't open very far, is the bottom line. So that is the clearance detail sheet. Let's look at hinge location. That's just a document that talks about where the factory suggests and recommends that you place the hinges. It is typical to see or to have Soss hinges installed in this sort of orientation. 2 is going to be pretty typical, and biased towards the top is how the factory recommends them. Now, they're normally just installed in our standard, American, sort of locations, top, middle, and bottom. However, if you look at hinge installations in door openings outside of the United States, you'll very often see 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. I would suggest that you confirm with the manufacturer of the door that this is a permissible location for your hanging hardware. There is published documentation that states that biasing them towards the top would be outside of what's recommended. You've got 2 hinges for a door up to 60 inch, and then you add another hinge for every 30 inch thereafter. So after 60, you'll add a third hinge. Once you get to 90, you'll add a fourth hinge. Up to 60 is 2 inches. So 60 and an eighth is 3 hinges. Up to, 89 and, 63, 64, that kind of thing. I'd probably get that confirmed, that would be okay by your manufacturer, but that's very common to see it installed that way. And the reason you do is because the Soss hinge, one of its hallmarks is, of course, carrying a large load or heavy door, and the top hinge is known to carry about 70% of the load of the top of the door. That top hinge does. So that's why they want to have 2 up at the top. Okay. Then, hinge sizing chart. This is what they call a nomograph, and this will allow you to determine which hinge you can use and how many you need. So what they're saying here is they've got a 30-inch wide door that happens to be 200 pounds, and they extend that line over and then go straight across. And depending on the door thickness, inch and 3/4 or 2 inch, you'll use either 4 of their 218s or 3 or 4 of their 220s. So I don't know the size of this door, but if we were dealing with a 36-inch wide door, we'd be down here. That would be about 150 pounds. We just kind of follow that up, go straight across. We're going to intersect the last 3 columns, which are 216, 218, and 220. So, a 218 hinge would really be 3 hinges, is where that would boil down to. But you can see that you have, the ability to use 216s. It will work for an inch and 3/4 thick door, but the 218 would be the common hinge for inch and 3/4 door work. So this chart is really helpful because it will allow you to understand what hinge you're supposed to be ordering up here based on the width, the weight, and then the thickness. Okay. 90-degree open. That's just a technical drawing showing what that dimension X is, which is the dimension from this point to either face of the Soss hinge listed. So it helps you understand the E dimension even better, where your door and frame are going to potentially collide, and dimension X is this imaginary point calculated based on the hinge, and then of course what dimension E is going to be. Cased jamb detail. Okay, sure. So this just gives you this is a drawing that shows people what they would be doing if they were installing this onto a cased opening frame, what it would look like. And again, simply referencing that dimension E. It's so important not to exceed that so that your door isn't prevented from opening, that they refer to it multiple times in the documentation. And that covers all of these. There's a link below this video here to the manufacturer's page. And we can pull that up and review not only all of the Soss products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation here, but also a link to the website, as well as a link to the product catalog. Now let's take a look at the product catalog. Before we do that, instructions for prepping and opening for Soss hinges. This is one part of what I was driving at in the catalog. This is an explanation as to how to use their template system. So if you are prepping for these hinges, and I did a job for a client maybe 3 or 4 months ago where they ordered their hardware, but also ordered all of the templating, the template kit, and the bit and the guide that they need for doing the work. Literally everything was sent to them to do this one job. A mess of hinges, and then all of the template guide, the router bit, and then the template system itself. And this will be in the catalog, and we'll show you where that is. But here's that catalog. Now, when it comes to weight, they have a newer hinge, relatively newer hinge, called the Hercules. It has a nomograph on it. This nomograph gets way beyond the weight range of even the standard extremely capable Soss hinge. So you can see that this nomograph is going to get you door width, okay, in inches. But when you look over here at the weight, that chart tops out at over 1,000 pounds. So a 3-foot door, let's say that, you know, a 3-foot door, let's say it's 500 pounds. So you're going to be right about here. Keep going over. You use 5 or 4 of the 218H or the 220H, depending on the door thickness, 1 3/4 or 2 inch. You can see that the statement made, and I don't recall if I had said it, but it had been said by someone at Soss, I don't care how heavy the door is, keep throwing Soss hinges at it. And that statement is somewhat shown here as well, as the heavier you go, the more hinges they're adding. So if you really need to do heavy material, they you know, if the standard hinge from Soss won't handle it, go to the Hercules hinge. In this catalog is going to be a comprehensive summary of all of their hinges. Okay, so the 216 and the FR, the 216 FR are listed here. Now, interestingly, we did not order the FR version of the 216 for these clients, but that's what they shipped. It's fire rated up to 20 minutes. You can do fire ratings beyond that as well. So a 418 and a 418 SS will get you to 90-minute or 3-hour. Okay, they won't show on the other hinges because you know, to do a 90-minute or a B label or an A label, you'll need a 400 series hinge. That's what this document's trying to show. That's what I'm trying to say. And here those hinges are here. Power transfer hinge is available, not uncommon. We sell those occasionally. You'll have an electric lock, you'll have a request to exit or a rec switch. You will have, you know, perhaps an electromagnetic lock. You might have glass that requires electricity to turn it from transparent to opaque. All kinds of stuff can run through there. Then other Soss hinges are here, and I jumped halfway through the catalog, more than that, just to start that, showing you where those hinges were, the Hercules hinge. But as you scroll through, you're going to find that there's a tremendous amount of encyclopedic information in here. And now that template kit that I had spoken about a moment ago, the template system, is detailed here. I do have a video going over the entire kit as well. The accessories, router bits, the guides. And for that project that we did reinforcement, that project I mentioned earlier where we did a very heavy gauge hollow metal door, I don't know that the factory ordered these reinforcements from Soss. They may have when they built the door and frame. Maybe they just made their own. They probably did. But nonetheless, if you're doing hollow metal work or some sort of iron work and you want to use Soss hinges, you can buy the reinforcements from them as well. I'll leave the rest of the catalog up to you to discover. Let's wrap up this video on camera. In conclusion, nice quality product from Soss, a very unique product. They have been making these for several decades. They have said that they're never going to make a multi-adjustable hinge, and when you approach that statement with a new or a deeper understanding of what it takes to prep for those, you might say to yourself, yeah, I mean, as long as the frame stays true plumb level and square, there would never be even a thought to need to adjust anything. And really the adjustment that occurs on pairs of doors where they're sagging at the top and there's a large gap at the bottom, those are butt hinges. They don't handle the weight like a Soss hinge does. You don't have separation or an opening of the leaves to create that very small margin between the two doors when you're using a Soss hinge. So because going to a Soss hinge inherently eliminates the need to move things around, it really becomes the statement from people, you know what, I want to be able to adjust the door and frame if I'm not exactly accurate. Understood. That would be nice. It's just when you're building anything out of wood, you know, you don't adjust anything. The front of the Soss catalog shows an arched opening. There's no, you know, adjusting of anything that's being built there. And I really consider marking the center line accurately. Don't exceed dimension E over here. There's nothing else to worry about. These are a marvelous invention and solve many problems. The only time that the only limitation on concealed hinges, whether it be Soss or Tectus or Sugatsuni or McKinney and that other one I can't think of, unless I can't recall it because it doesn't exist, is if you're applying material on the pull side of the opening. We're doing a job now where it's a very high-end European watch manufacturer, the biggest brand name we all know of, for a shop in Boston, and they have some stone that's applied to the pull side of the openings, a concealed hinge. So they've got half-inch, they have an 1 3/4 thick door with half-inch aluminum honeycomb. Onto it is half-inch marble. It's going to be 350 pounds, let's say. It's no problem for butt hinges. Butt hinges can handle that. Certainly no problem for Soss hinges. The problem, what the issue is for the Soss, is that dimension E will be substantially exceeded, and it would never work. The door wouldn't open but a few degrees. And that sort of application requires that we use a butt hinge because we can move the vertical axis of pivoting to stand proud of the door and frame very slightly, so that the door will actually open. That application requires a 6-inch wide hinge because of the location of the screw holes, what the back set must be, and the fact that we're adding 1 inch of basically dead space outside of there that we can't encroach into, and we need to move that vertical axis of pivoting out far enough. So the downside is you're going to have exposed hardware, and the client did not prefer that. But we're really limited by the laws of, geometric laws here of what can and can't be done. That sort of application also complicates the door closer application as well. They want to use a slide track. However, the concern with a track style closer, I understand, is not really so much that the door won't physically open. And of course, a track style closer can't handle that weight, but the client's proceeding with it anyway. You're topping out at like 225 or 250 pounds on a track style closer. This door is going to be well north of 300 pounds. The issue really is that the degree of opening that you're going to accomplish needs to be determined by engineering, by plotting that, likely in an AutoCAD style program, to know, based on what degree of opening you want to get to, where you'll place the closer, that track style closer, onto that application with that 6-inch wide hinge. Anyway, that's a long diversion to say that is a limitation of concealed hinges like the Soss. They don't tolerate adding panels onto it. Now, if you're adding them on the push side of the opening, it's no problem. Add as much as you want, but adding it on the pull side is a problem. Anyway, if you have any questions on the Soss 205, this is a 216 in US5, concealed hinge, or any other Soss product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you very much. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.